tax. That became later on. But if you have a right to keep the fruits of your labor, you will not have an income tax. When the Republic returns to us, you will not have an income tax on the people. You also will not have a central bank that's debasing your currency and destroying the value of the money. They will be gone. When we were so wealthy and having so much availability of the wealth, we got careless and we introduced this notion that we have an income tax, the Federal Reserve, that we change our foreign policy. This all happened in the teens, 1913, in the Woodrow Wilson era, that we had this moral obligation to be the policeman of the world, to spread democracy, that we needed a central bank. But this ushered in the age of big government. But instead, the people went along with it, and it seemed like it didn't hurt us too much because the wealth kept pouring in, you know, and we stayed to a wealthy nation. We had so much wealth to consume. And then we even tolerated the inflation. The valuation of the currency since 1913 has been 98%. They've distorted it gradually. And you can't be a productive nation unless you follow the rules of private properties and sound money and limited taxes, limited regulations, and not wasting our resources trying to be the policeman of the world. Those who wanted to redistribute wealth through force of government, they convinced the whole country that, well, redistribution is important to take care of the poor people because they're entitled to it. But people aren't entitled to each other's, you're not entitled to somebody else's money. You can't go into their house and take their money. Idea that if you're not entitled to go to your neighbor's house and take what they have and you don't have, what made it legal and what made it moral to send the government to do that? It's still wrong to do it. But it was always designed to help the poor people. But I think that was a facade. I think it was always an intended, you're pretending. But I think the poor end up not getting any real benefits, but they end up with the crumbs. And I think the housing bubble is the perfect example. Yes, people are qualified. Everybody should be able to get free education, free medical care, free housing, and they'll be taken care of. So they set up this program, print a lot of money, and let people buy a house. The price of houses will go up. Well, borrow some more money, spend more money, be a consumer, never thinking about savings and production and building industries. And what happened? Who made a lot of money during this time? It was Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and Wall Street, the banks that were involved in the derivatives markets. They yelled and screamed. They said, there's going to be a depression. There's going to be a depression. We have to bail them out. They're too big to fail. So Congress rushes back into session and they start spending money. The Fed spent up to $15 trillion of churning credit. In secret. That's real insult. In secret, they pass this money out. Maybe it isn't working. No, it isn't working. It's a total failure. This is why I think we're getting thousands and thousands of people waking up and saying, yes, the government can't take care of me from cradle to grave, because what does government have? They produce nothing. All they can do is steal from one group and give it to another, and that destroys wealth. That does not produce wealth. Because if we truly are humanitarians, if we truly want to help people, we don't do it through authoritarianism of government. You have to do it through voluntarism and productivity, enthusiasm and self-reliance and sound money, a strictly limited government that protects the liberty. That's what really counts. But they'll say, oh, Ron Paul wants to go back to the 19th century and go back and you know, something old and ancient. But let me tell you what's old and ancient. That's tyranny. That's been around way too long. Most of the world has been run by tyrants. Most of the world today is being run by tyrants. And this is quite a bit different. So the experiment that we've had worked very well, but then we got careless. I think that, you know, that you can spend forever. Sometimes people who inherit a lot of money, or some people who are successful and get millions and millions of dollars, but they don't understand where it came from. They can get careless and they lose it all. I think we as a nation tended to do that. that we concentrate on that. And what did that invite? It invited business people more to invest more money in lobbyists than in R&D and developing new products and being competitive around the world, because they went to Washington and they took over in their best interest. And right now the people are saying that the programs that we have in Washington, the spending is not in their best interest. It's dangerous. And they have now come to the conclusion, although it's been a long struggle to convince the majority of the American people, it is not in our best interest to be involved in endless wars that have been undeclared or unwinnable, and they ought to end. The fact that that is a danger makes me very much concerned about the undermining of our civil liberties and our due process of law in this country. This is very dangerous. Just think of all the fear-mongering that occurred and why we had to go to war against Iraq because they were about to attack us with a nuclear weapon and Al-Qaeda was there. None of that was true. It was, at 9/11 was used as an excuse to do something they wanted to have done for many, many years. And of course, even here at home, there have been people proposing certain types of legislation that would invade our privacy, undermine the Fourth Amendment, and they couldn't get it passed. But guess what? 9/11 came and passed quickly 2 weeks later, called the Patriot Act. The one thing that the Patriot Act is not, it is not patriotic. Matter of fact, the only thing that we should do about the Patriot Act is repeal it. That's what we ought to do. I don't know if you've noticed, but the one thing that, if you look at the name of a bill that comes out of Congress, you can almost always assume it's opposite of what the title tells you it's going to do. A little bit of deceptions there. So can you imagine if they'd have only called it repeal the Fourth Amendment Act? How many people would have voted for it? So when we make the bill to repeal the Patriot Act, we should call it Restore the Fourth Amendment Act. But this has deeply undermined our privacy. There's no doubt about it, because that was a major issue for the founders and then after the Revolution to put that in, because it was the British involvement of going into the houses and looking at the papers and looking for whether or not they bought their stamps and paid their taxes. But they would come in and they'd stay in their houses, no search warrants, and just total abuse. But this is what's happening to us in America. The houses are being broken into rather routinely, and at all levels of government. We have these SWAT teams going in, and unfortunately, many times they're going in and they're going to try to find out if somebody's using an illegal drug. And they go in there and people die. They don't even show the search warrant because they don't get them. And they get to write them. The person breaking into the houses get to write their own search warrants. This was the kind of thing that we had a revolution about.